We're going to work here in Unit 2 today a little bit, and I think I have a pretty well-recorded set of like lecture videos and content. If you follow these 2 lecture videos here, you pretty much have completed this assignment, of course, converting it to whatever your own content is or following mine. So that's pretty well documented. What I didn't have a video of was completing the case studies, and that's kind of a typical pattern for me. I don't usually show people the step-by-step on that because it's really part of the process of learning it. But I do typically provide the solutions in the aftermath. But I thought it would be useful here as we do the full stack cert in summer semester 2020 to kind of give you a demonstration of how to proceed with case studies. Case studies are important, of course, as I mentioned to the group before recording started, that you get them right so that when you go to the next chapter, you're building on something that's correct. Author does provide solutions, but I usually prefer that you struggle through it and figure it out on your own and learn how to interpret the case studies into something meaningful, basically. So what they're intending, and then turning it into the page that they want you to create. So what I've done, in this Unit 2 here, because I know sometimes people don't get their books right away, is I actually included the instructions from the book on completing the case study. But these case study instructions will be found at the end of each chapter that we're working on. So it's expected that you have the book. If for any reason you don't, please let me know so that I can make sure at least you have the instructions for doing that if you don't have the book, because there's a lot of points involved. All right, so let's start by looking at that. All right, so it says, I'm not sure if I pulled this from the 8th edition or 9th edition. My gut tells me it's the 8th edition, so we could probably verify that. But here we have a scenario for a website. A guy owns a coffee shop and he wants to create a few, pretty simple little site, homepage, menu site, or menu page, music, and jobs. And what we see here, this is called a sitemap, folks, and it's just a really kind of primitive visual representation of a site, before you build. And for silly as this seems, like, I don't need a diagram, I know it's in my head, right? Yeah, if it's a simple site, yes. But if you're working to create something that's more complex, and I've worked, on some websites, where it's not like 5, 10, 20 pages, it's like 1,000 pages. And there's a huge hierarchy, and having a diagram like this really helps. So that's called a sitemap. You will have an assignment later that will relate to whatever project you choose that will ask you to create a sitemap. The other thing that designers often do before they build a site is they create this thing called a wireframe. And so the guy that owns this is like, well, okay, I want to have a header here at the top, navigation, that's when the menu is going to be. There's going to be this like main content area, and then the items that we put in the content will look, go down here, and then we'll have a footer at the bottom. And this is a very, very typical website layout. But this rough visual representation is called a wireframe. And I think that's also a very important step at creating a website, to have some sort of like a basic visual of what you're intending. And that way there's no mistaking what you're shooting for. All right. So here are the tasks that we have in this case study. It says create a folder for the Java Jam website, create the home page, and create the menu page. So we're going to create a folder in 2 pages. All right. So let's follow the instructions here, and I'm going to pretend like this is my homework, and hopefully you guys are following along. So let's see here. It says create a folder on your hard drive or portable storage device called Java Jam to contain your Java Jam website. Now you notice a curiosity here, and sometimes students will miss that, or they'll think it's a typo, but they're like, well, it's all lowercase and there's no spaces between the words. That is not a mistake. In fact, many web designers, and I happen to be one of them, when we do what we call static HTML pages, basic HTML, what we're learning is the convention for naming all files and folders is to keep everything lowercase and remove all spaces. Now, the lowercase thing is really just one of those things, because I mentioned last week, I think, as we were together, that sometimes when you do this, the, you know, when you're working on your local operating system and you can put a capital letter in there by mistake and it still works, but you move it to the web server and it doesn't. If you keep everything lowercase, you kind of eliminate that as a possibility, because it's lowercase everywhere and you always know to be lowercase. And when you move to like other types of web development, you start to break away from that. But for the most part, when you do static pages, I highly recommend no spaces and all lowercase. Now, the no space thing is a little more curious, because no spaces, in the past, you could never count on whether your web server would support spaces and file names or not, or whether the consumer's browser or operating system would support it. So the recommendation is always leave spaces out of any file or folder names for anything web. So I'll go ahead and make that folder. And, you know, I've been, I guess, working in this GTC folder, right? And I might even go as far as actually having like, you know, unit 1, right? And then inside unit 1, I would have, you know, we have the, you know, HTML basics assignment. So you can put all your stuff for that in there, and then maybe create another folder and name it exactly what they said, Java Jam, all lowercase, no spaces. Then I'm just going to go right into that folder, and I'm just going to go ahead and right click, create a new file, text document. I'm going to highlight the whole name and then just type index.html. Now I know that they're going to ask us to do this in a subsequent step, so I'm kind of shortcutting a couple of steps here. All right, the home page, use the text editor, right? So this is what we're shooting for. Launch a text editor, create a web page with the following specifications. So now I kind of did it backwards. I created the file first, and now I'm going to open it for editing. You could do it the other way around. That's up to you. But very quickly, I will right click, edit with Notepad++. I don't want to double click it, because what happens when you double click, it goes into the browser, and of course it's blank because there's nothing in it. But if I right click and either edit with Notepad++ or whatever your favorite tool is, and you can see I have a number of them here, go ahead and do that. Now, if you've been following along with the HTML basics thing, you'll know that we always have to start our documents with a doc type of HTML. This is the HTML5 doc type, much more simple than the previous versions. There's also the need to put in the HTML tag. And I proceed a little bit differently than the author does probably, but whenever I'm creating code from scratch, I have this habit that I've developed over the years that whenever I create an opening tag, I always create the closing tag right away, because sometimes if I don't, I forget, and then you have a broken document. And then you see I left space, right? Now, this tag here, it's recommended by the author, and I think it's really a good practice, especially for multilingual websites, to declare what the official language is of the page. Now, we have this benefit in the Western world that all these coding technologies were all developed in English. Many of them here in the United States or in Europe, but all of them in English. So whenever you think about like people over in the Orient learning how to do this stuff, you know, they have to, you know, first learn English and then learn how to code, because they have to code in English too. And to me, that's kind of a mind blower, you know. Wait, I have to learn another language and learn to code in it, you know? So when you read about like, you know, Chinese or Indian hackers, I guess Indians would be off the table because they speak English there too, but they have that language barrier, but put that in. The next section of the document usually is the title section, right? And I assume it's going to say Java Jam. We'll have to look at the instructions. Open and close the title tag right away. Usually they're asking you to put in your meta tag too. And this is another one of those things that's hypothetically required, but if it's not included, it's assumed. All right. This once again ties into you know, languages and character sets of things that you see on the screen. UTF-8 is the basic. Now, I did make a mistake here, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I forgot to encapsulate that stuff in the head section of the document. And usually I do a little spiel on it, but you can catch that in the other videos. But an HTML document is really kind of broken up into two sections. There's the body section and the head section. And the way I always describe this to students is the stuff that goes here is the visible part of the page, the stuff that people are going to see on the screen, inside the browser. Anything that would go in the head section is usually either a special directive, a link to an external resource like a style sheet or JavaScript file, or maybe meta tags, and also the title tag. And why the title tag is important again is when you look at something in the browser, that's the verbiage that appears here. So you control the words that appear in the tab. Now I have a lot open, so they're kind of truncated, but that's what that controls. It also helps Google, figure out what page you're on, right? So here's the basic structure of the document, and I think that's what they were asking us to do, right? Let's see if we can find the instructions. Where the heck did they go? See how much stuff we've covered today. All right. Not sure where it went, but I guess I'll just click on it again and open it up. Apparently it was right there. One more click would have got me there, see? So always be patient. All right, so all right, launch a text editor and create a web page with the following specification. So they're just assuming, see, that you know how to build the basic page already, because you're gonna go back to the chapter and figure it out. All right, so looks like use a descriptive page title accompany is a good choice. So Java Jam, I think, is okay. Code the header element with text, Java Jam Coffee House. Now what they're referring to here, wireframe header, is this part of the page. And the one common mistake I see with students early on is they'll misinterpret that directive with putting it here in the title, and that's not correct. You notice that head is not header, right? And really what they're referring to is they want you to create an H1 tag. That's a header tag. And what was it? Java Jam Coffee House. That's actually the header. It's an H1. I like to indent them a little bit. And you can indent as much as you want. And there's always been a controversy about like tabs versus spaces. I'm spacing, by the way, just a couple. Next directive. All right. Code the header element with the text Java Jam Coffee House contained within a heading 1 element. So it tells you which one to do. Place the following text within a nav element with bold text using the B element. Okay, so I want you to take all this, all these words. I'm just going to copy them. Why not? Right? I'll paste them onto the page, and then I'm going to put them inside a nav element. So this is intended for the menu, obviously, and then I'm just going to kind of do this. And they also want them all to be bold. And so I'm just going to surround it all with a bold tag, and then I'm going to close my nav tag. Okay. Now, some people will, because they're recognizing that these are all separate words, will put bold, opening and closing bold tags around each separate word. You can do that too. Since they all need to be bold, you can just encapsulate them all. That's fine as well. Since I haven't done it in a while, I'm going to press Control S to save, or you can hit the little icon. Move on to the next step. Next thing it says is code anchor tags so that home links to index, menu links to menu, views, etc. So I think I can do that. And so right away then I'm recognizing that it might be better to put all of these on individual lines, right? If I'm going to put anchor tags around them. And then I'll even put these closing tags here. Oops. And then I would just proceed by doing this. So I'd say href equals, home pages are always index.html. And then we'll go to the other side of home here and put in a closing anchor tag. We would repeat that process, you know, and hey, you don't have to type everything. Copy paste is a wonderful thing. So, and what I'm going to do here is, since I have that in my buffer already, I'm just going to do it multiple times. So for menu, I'm just going to type menu, music, music. And you guys are catching the little trick I'm doing. If I double click the word, it highlights the word. And then I'll also copy the closing tag. Now, notice that there is a space in there. And you know what? It might be actually wise to leave it in, but you know what? Let's see what it looks like without, and what it looks like with. So let's save this. And then I'm going to go back to my file folder here and relaunch the page. And you can see we already are in progress, and they all look like links, but we don't have any pages to link to except the index page. So if I click on one of these, it's not going to do anything. But we are getting there. All right. So this is the procedure. And unfortunately, I cannot go any further in the demonstration because I am starting another class in just a couple of minutes. So this is kind of to get you seeing how the author gives the instructions and what he's expecting from you. So there's a little bit of interpretation there. But they do tell you, you know, it's like code the following text within an H2 element. Okay, that's pretty simple. That would go right below the menu. And then create a content in an unordered list. That would be a UL. And you would list all these things. Ultimately, you know, what you're going to be looking to create with this assignment. And I'm trying to remember where I put this stuff now. I might even have to FileZilla in. So I'm like kind of racing the clock here to give you a demonstration. And somewhere I have the, oh, I think it's all here. I'm hoping I didn't delete it, which is possible, I suppose. I guess I can find it this way. So for Java Jam, your final output, wait, okay. So I really what I'm looking for is this pathway here to add to my URL. Didn't mean to try to FTP it. All right, so this is what you're looking for as the end result of that case study. All right, I'm not going to show you the code because you need to try to figure out the rest on your own. But please keep in mind the author does provide the solutions, and I will also be providing the solutions for you as well. All right, folks, that ends this video as I need to get ready for the other class.